Hello, this is Dr. Winston George Tannis, Chief Justice Winston George Tannis, and in that role again, and as a Global Chief Justice, and on the current worries in Gaza, Israel, the entire Levant region, and Ukraine, Russia, and Yemen. I am going to be focusing more intensely on the problems that exist and continue to exist in Gaza and Israel and associated areas like the West Bank and Lebanon and Jordan and Syria. And because there's been a failure to secure an agreeable truce or ceasefire or pause for humanitarian aid before the commencement of Ramadan. And the narrative has become inflammatory again. And an inflammatory narrative can crush a peace process. It can bring a nation or region into states of extreme warfare. My voice is that of a distinctive and historic, well-tempered, neutral, and impartial Chief Justice, and of historic content through my training of historic kinds in law and judging and mediation and international relations and the philosophies and processes of law, including the new processes associated with the law, annexed to the law, separate from the law, mediation and arbitration and facilitated processes, let alone my command of history and futurism. These are credentials I charge you with, as I'm trained to do, so that you can place due weight on the expert opinion that flows herein and the others that I've made. It's been several decades now since I assumed this posture without deviance from it. And I'm known internationally for such objective, impartial, enlightened judgment through all my writings and other works. And now, more significantly, levered bottom of the ninth, just before the commencement of Ramadan, depending on what time sphere you're in. And as the commitment to humanitarian aid increases upon my calling and other great world leaders, and with my insistence in my last global circular, last several, and my last WG TV broadcast from my judicial chamber, that all infrastructure of warfare or warfare infrastructure are to be removed from the Gaza region so that what we can enter into without fail is a long-term peace and co-governance model that is equally fair and enlightening and supportive of all persons in the region, including Jews and Israelis and Palestinians and the entire glorious mix of individuals and groups across the entire Levant. My feelings on Ukraine and Russia have not changed over months now. My peace plan remains the very best and smartest, the most historically sensitive, the most sensitive to the international law norms that are on the table and regarding both the security of Russia and Ukraine in the world as neighbors and as parts of, quite beautifully, both Europe and Asia, and through remarkable contributions to both continents for many decades and centuries now. Ramadan is here, Chinese New Year, the Gregorian New Year, the Julian New Year. For those of mind and substance and sense of evolution and metaphysics and jurisprudence, all these winds of the good, of God, of goodness, not separate from the law, but fusing the great laws in all jurisdictions, including at the international level, within the UN Charter. And I tell you, as a distinguished Chief Justice, that when we're interpreting provisions at law, and certainly in the highest legal documents known as governing charters and constitutions, we can only read the letters through a proper understanding of the policy and the spirits. So I'm not speaking as a theologian right now or a philosopher upon God or the existence of God. My training in philosophy and theology do indeed matter and fuse right now in my role as Chief Justice. And for anybody who knows anything about the history of jurisprudence and the judicial empire, if they're above half-witted, they know there's no argument here, I'm correct. And it's part of what makes the formal law and formal judicial conduct, and on the international planes, what it is, what it should be. And in light of the unique Chief Justice chamber that I've created with highly unusual judicial diplomatic powers, and in keeping with the times and my sense of the history of the new post-1948, post-1918 international relations, international law, and diplomatic world order. And that matters. It makes me the judge I am upon matters domestic and international at once, for that is the only way to judiciously and diplomatically treat the New World Order and the New World Federation as it's to be properly stewarded. So I'm not giving up on Gaza. I think with the commitment to increased humanitarian aid, one example of that is President Joe Biden confirming in his State of the Union address and before such time that humanitarian supplies would be provided by the United States, knowing other governments like Jordan will pitch in significantly and to protect civilians, and even civilians who are being improperly used as shields to deter a ceasefire and truce with a view to long-term peace in the area to the benefit of Jewish, Israeli, Palestinian, Lebanese, Syrian, and Jordanian purposes. I haven't formed the new Levantine Commonwealth within the new Asia League without conscience of how violence in any one of those Levantine countries impacts violence elsewhere within the Levant, within the Middle East, within North Africa, and elsewhere. And hence why today I speak of the connection between the Ukrainian-Russian problem and those of the Levant and Yemen. And I'm not going to branch out beyond there, but there are strong associations between all three, and because a world war is building up with re-nuclearization and militarization efforts, all in violent conflict with the evolutionary trajectory properly set by the UN Charter towards less sorrow and more security and peace for all. So what are the problems? Some of the problems are attempts to deviate beyond the spirit of the law. How the international relations order is to evolve and fairly and with a great regard for international pluralism and world federalism. And one of the reasons I'm so upset by this new world war and what's happened in Ukraine and Russia is we had made so much progress. So many beautiful countries learning from each other, adopting the genius of each other to improve their own societies, only to escalate like this and set into mode certain regressive patterns. This is not a new world war over democracy versus authoritarianism. It's not. That's a fool's paradise and a simpleton's dichotomy. The world is blessed by a multiplicity of governance systems, as I've explained before, on the broad continuum of Republican, democratic, socialist, and communist societies. And I use the word Republican because the idea of republicanism, in essence, is that we locate the sovereign, the grace of spirit, the dignity of men and women within all citizens, all global citizens, in a new era of respect for the citizen and their relationship with the state. And in the new international order, we think of the relationship between the global citizen and the regional and international governance bodies, like the Commonwealth of Nations and the Francophonie and the Arab League and the African Union, the Organization of American States, and of course the grand umbrella organization, which is the United Nations. And I've mentioned before, the United Nations in its current embryonic state is not broken. It's still developing, and we're still developing the world along its terms as we reverse the regression that's in motion right now. I've mentioned my stature. I will talk further about several points that will be included in my written release to the world shortly after this broadcast goes global, and so that we will all commence Ramadan in the proper spirits of the new Gregorian and Julian calendars and the Chinese New Year, and all the high-minded events that mark the spiritual, social, and justice sensibilities of so many religions and countries and communities across the whole of the planet. We really are trying to review history at present to cure the present and make for a better future, and that is the mandate and only correct reading of the UN Charter, and we have to keep working on it, all of us, not just the experts and elites in the judiciary and in the establishment of political science and political action and diplomacy. As many of my better predecessors have said, including Lester B. Pearson of Canada, one of the great infrastructures of peace is peace in the heart and mind of each and every citizen. And I've been committed to that for several decades, and through an organization I created called Beacon Watch International. It's pronounced with equal vigor amidst constituting New America and part of the fiber, substance, and charters of both the Levantine Commonwealth and the New Asia League. And as many of you know, in light of my situs and where I was born and the traditions that flow through me because of my particular upbringing and education, and my formal association through such with the Commonwealth of Nations, the Commonwealth of the post-Soviet era, the Francophonie, the Organization of American States, the Arab League, the African Union, and through great and smart effort by me now, the New Asia League, to affirm this continent amidst the whole in new ways and to help engender an even better pan-Asian spirit as we learn from each other, as we think about organizations like the European Union that's done a very good job trying to breed a pan-European as well as global citizenship ethic, so each citizen of Europe might know peace and diplomatic sharing and wisdom and commercial and political sharing amidst the various states of Europe, so that Europeans can identify with themselves on many layers and good layers, and as proud Europeans and members of countries they've originated from, and at once global citizens, each and every one of them. I mentioned in my last address that there's certain beautiful expressions that exist in nearly all languages, if not all. In the Arabic language, Salam alaikum, may peace be upon you, is a common salutation, as is shalom. And I remind you of these expressions in English, in French as well. Que la paix soit avec toi, may peace be with you, in English. Irini matsi su, in Greek. La paz sea con vosotros, in Spanish. La pace con te, in Italian. Que a paz estea com você, in Portuguese. And once again, for the perfect linguists out there, effort matters. The dynamism and the diversity within each language matters. And so does effort in promoting a spirit of peace through these great phrases in many languages of the world. And why, as I've explained before? Because peace, the peace doctrine, is the finding within transcendental philosophy by the wise men and women, philosophers, sages, and scientists over millennia. It is part of that great capacity of the human species through cognition and intuition to locate the forms of the transcendental that best define the purpose, the existence, the evolutionary goals of personkind. That is the greatest truth of the finding and the search for truth itself in what remains a tenuous understanding of why we are here and why. But we've known for millennia now that if we pursue the good, if we pursue the justice form, if we pursue the idea of a harmonious community and society and republic, then we are on the right course. Somehow, through the grace of creation, we know that through intuition and intellect, the operation of cognition and memory, and learning through the buildup of memory and history texts and theoretical texts on the nature of personkind. Well, I'll end as I did last time, without setting off the phrases in over 150 languages. And because the Chinese and the Americans have such an important role to play as Security Council leaders in assisting me to secure peace in Gaza, in assisting me in securing or advancing the role of the Levantine Commonwealth and the New Asia League, and so that both UN leaders can say they've done their job, their ergon, in favor of the UN Charter, which they've agreed to as nations, along with well over 175 other countries of the planet at present. So Ping An Yu Ni Tong Zai. Ping An Yu Ni Tong Zai. In Chinese, peace be upon you. Shalom. Salam alaikum. La pace con te. I'm going to remind you all of one other thing, and this will remind you of why I am considered the greatest Chief Justice on the planet, the relevance to jurisprudence of metaphysical thinking on the place and existence of God. No matter how we know the good, the goodness spirit that each part of the globe has known through its sages for millennia now, I can tell you I know as an award-winning philosopher, and before I became an award-winning Chief Justice and mediator, man of doctrinal law, as well as legal sociology and legal philosophy, and a master of political science and international relations, I gave considerable thought to the existence of God, and I can tell you, unlike some other philosophers who have orbited the globe, that God is not asleep, he's not dead. God as phenomenon is very much alive, and it is impossible to disprove me. There's no chance for a rational atheism. There is a chance for a beautiful agnosticism, and there's enlightenment through personal encounter with the light to know of the certitude of God's existence, the goodness's existence, because it is an objective scientific phenomenon studied through history and empirical data, let alone something that a person may know through guidance into the spirit world. And that matters for spirited interpretations of constitutions and documents like the United Nations Charter, which governs us at present as we work day and night, 7 days a week, for solutions upon Gaza, Israel, the West Bank, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, in the Levant region, in Yemen, as we must, a conflict between Islamic empires that needs to end in favor of the Islamic goal of peace and harmony within all of our communities, let alone our vulnerable, highly vulnerable Muslim and Christian and Hindu and Buddhist and other communities, including great humanitarian communities in the modern era. I'd like you to think about that, not as an afterthought, but as a guiding spiritual prism for interpretive work in the law, within the doctrinal law, not the canon law, within the doctrinal law of the more secular systems as well, that operate with a sense of religious pluralism, and so that one theocratic body will not dominate the thinking that orbits the UN Charter's interpretation. That matters. That matters. We learn through the interfaith movement of the great wisdom brought to the theocratic table by so many sages and philosophers and theocratic geniuses upon the existence of God, the goodness's wishes for us as human beings to build harmonious, peaceful, productive, creative, and supportive communities. I might curtail this address with just a few remarks to encourage you to seek out my global circular that will include my full text on this. My judicial notes for this address will go global shortly after this broadcast. My plans for Ukraine and Russia are not impossible. They're based on the history, the present, the present dynamic in the world and the possibilities for peace. The current Pope has wisely followed my lead in suggesting a flag be raised upon peace. I suggested a flag be raised in Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza to celebrate a truce. And I even suggested the colors for that flag in my last address. The Pope has suggested a white flag be raised between Ukrainians and Russians who might know a winning, victorious solution for all by looking at and implementing in a real way my peace plan for co-governance, for security for both nations, sovereignty for both nations, one being a superpower with a permanent spot at the Security Council table known as Russia, and one like Canada, a wonderful middle power player with a similar population, a country that has a real chance to adopt, in many respects, the Canadian model of engagement with the whole world, let alone its superpower neighbor known as Russia. And for those of you who don't know the geography of Canada, that country shares the longest undefended border in the world with the United States of America, and with a history suggesting both peace and war as realities and possibilities, and yet they've been able to maintain the peace for decades and centuries now through intelligent political, economic, and diplomatic behavior that's involved a respect for each other's sovereignty, differences, and yet security, worries, and interests at all times. And that's what we need to focus on as we set out a new security model for Ukraine, Russia, Eastern Europe, and Western Europe, and a new security model, as I've stated, we need not just in Palestine and Israel, but for the entire Levant. The time is now. The Levantine Commonwealth was created to generate a further pan-Levantine spirit. And with the assistance of at least 2 Security Council members, I've called for the United States and China to be joint leaders in a multilateral security force that will ensure and enforce a lengthy period of peace, harmony, and rebuilding and progress and productivity across the whole of the Levant. So once again, that's not just for Gaza and the West Bank and Israel, but for Lebanon, Jordan, and Syria. I have political solutions for Syria that I will share in a different broadcast. The entire Levant in a state of peace and cooperation, and with its most proximate neighbors such as Turkey and Iraq and Egypt, etc. I will sign off now as Chief Justice Dr. Winston Tannis. I was going to read out, or at least speak about, every provision of my written statement, but I leave it to you to visit winstontannis.com and request the written statement if you're not on the existing circular. Alternatively, you can do it through beaconwatchintl.org, similarly through the contact box, all lowercase, spelled out as it sounds, beaconwatchintl.org, and Winston Tannis, TANNIS.com. And I welcome your request and to include you in permanent fashion on the WG Global Circular, which often attaches WG magazine and specific writings and ebooks by me, and oftentimes distributed at no charge, and because of mission of the Winston George Global Governance Advisory and Foundation, and the mandate I've set out for Beacon Watch International as 2 non-for-profit hybrid organizations within the diversified WG Beacon and Echo Eternity group. I'll end by saying, if you want to participate in the life of these peace-oriented, goodwill, good governance organizations, please also request the plan to expand the Beacon WGT residences and institutes as associated with the residences, and the Beacon Heritage Library, once again, as part of the residence system. We've been operating for a number of years. We've got a beautiful prototype, and it is time to expand across every capital of the planet. And each and every resident gets free seminars on peace studies, on mediation, on arbitration, on facilitation, on doctrinal law and its relationship with these new modes of conflict avoidance and resolution, and in nonviolent manner. And even though there's been a slight preference towards international students from across the board, we also take on equity basis, people from all walks of life, let alone international students and visitors and asylum seekers. And we will continue that program in each and every capital of the world, including London and Paris and Taipei and Sydney and Lagos and Cairo and places like New York and Mexico City and Sao Paulo. I could go on, but I won't. There's not a capital in the world that we're not interested in expanding into, and to promote our peace mission, which includes pedagogy and professional development for all who want to be a part of the residence system or who simply want to learn from our institute, and to grow the planet and the infrastructure for peace that is made through each and every citizen, no matter what they decide to do with their careers within or outside diplomacy or politics or scholastic political science and economy, etc. Thank you again. Merci. Shukran. And please be sure to tune in again for future broadcasts. This is, once again, Chief Justice Dr. Winston George Tannis from my judicial chamber, thanking you for your time and your prayers and thoughts and activities towards greater peace and security for the entire world, in accord with the very well-drafted United Nations Charter. We don't need any amendments. We may need some additions, but we need to make the UN Charter a better part of the living law. Thank you. Hello. Part 2 will elaborate on my written statement on the eve of the beginning of Ramadan, and in light of continuing challenges in Gaza. This is an abridged version of what Part 2 will be. And for now, I will simply say this war in Gaza is not between Jewish people and Muslim people at large. It isn't. That's a destructive and misleading narrative. For anyone in the world listening, it is not that simple, and that is a dishonest statement. Islam is composed of millions and billions of people, and across the Levant region, and the Muslim people are dedicated to peace and harmony within communities, all communities as part of their family life, their community life, and no matter which community they engage. This is a challenge, and I speak to you as someone with rapport in the Levant, as someone of Lebanese ancestry, which helps in many measures, Lebanon being a very multi-religious society, so I'm familiar with the various Christian and Muslim denominations and groupings within Lebanon and across the Levant. It's part of the beauty of the Levant. It's part of the gorgeous diversity of the Levant, and something to be preserved and cherished as part of the whole of not only the Arabic and Muslim world, but the entire Middle Eastern world. So once again, I'm going to be calling for, in part two, a jihad for peace. And indeed, Muslims and Jews and Christians agree on the paramount, the great status of God, directly and indirectly referred to, that spirit force creator of the planet. This is not to be viewed as a war between Muslims who dream of peace on earth every day and Jews. This is a conflict right now in Gaza, and principally involving Hamas. And what we need to do during Ramadan is not give up on a cessation of violence. We need to remove the obstacles to peace within Gaza, all instruments, all infrastructure of warfare, and we need to rebuild and build further the Israeli-Palestine region, and within the entire Levant. That is what I'm calling for. And as the founding leader of the new Levantine Commonwealth within the new Asia League. I look forward to speaking to you further in part two and elaborating on this abridgment. Thank you for your time. This is Chief Justice Dr. Winston George Tannis speaking to you from my headquarters and judicial chamber. Good night. Welcome to WG and another short episode on exercise. You know, I promised in a recent broadcast that you were going to see me in more diplomatic and political and juridical dress, my robes, my suits, my ties. But I'm also going to continue in my daily wear of athletic suits. The exercises I'm going to show you today, because this is not going to be about politics, diplomacy, or law. It's going to be strictly about my fitness and sport regimes, a background as an all-round two-time athlete of the year and lettered in over 10 sports, including high dexterity and mobility sports like tennis and basketball, football and soccer, as well as volleyball and cross-country running and a few other events. It's going to be about what you can do to get away from the sedentary lifestyle. And these are drills I've showed heads of state, high-level professionals in all fields, cabinet ministers, judges, etc. over years now. And it's stuff that I practice every day to get away from the sedentary lifestyle. Many of us at our desks with our computers, seated, enjoying entertainment, work, you name it. It's very important because I will tell you some of the indicators are awful across the world. Heart disease rates rising among both men and women, cancer rates, diabetes, type 2, not just affecting adults but infiltrating younger people. And there's a reason for all this. It's about lifestyle. It's about what we eat, what we do with our bodies, the level of exercise, and on a daily basis. So what I'm going to show you is going to help you break some of the modern molds that's leading to greater and greater illness and less energy in a day, and to do things you enjoy, to get to work in proper form, to raise your families, to enjoy your siblings and your friends. Today I'm just going to show you a few exercises, and I'm doing it from my office for a reason. I have my own fitness room and gym for the work I do with people, with my turbulence, equilibrium, fitness, and sport development model. But I'm going to show you stuff I do right here from my office. And what I'm doing now, and just to show you, I guess you can tell I'm not seated in my chair. So just imagine I've been seated in my chair for an hour or two and I need a break. Well, one of the best things you can do is get up and move around a little bit. And you can do that right in your office without spending time getting everything together and going to a fitness club or preparing for a run and changing clothing. And you can do this not just in your tracksuit at work. You can do it work from home, work from the workplace. You can do it in your suit, in your skirt. Okay, because the exercises I'm going to show you are certainly better than nothing. You're not going to perspire excessively, and you can reduce the excuse. So many of us so busy with family and professional life, but I'm going to show you how to find that 5-10 minutes to take the best break you can for you and your loved ones and your community. So one thing you can do is stand up and just with arms to the side, lift them up this way. You don't need weights to do this. You just need an office big enough so you can spread your arms and you're working your shoulders and your arms and repeat 10, 20, 30 times. Okay, you can open up your hands and go to the top of your head, touch the fingers and back down. And that works the different areas of the shoulder as well. And it's stimulating your metabolism as an example and your blood circulation. And one other thing you can do, and once again, when you're repeating on this, you decide. You might start at just 5 and then move up to 10 or 15. You might exert yourself a little more aggressively and get 20, 25 reps in. You might stay with 3 reps of 10 or 3 reps of 15 or 3 reps of 20. And you find that 5 or 10 minutes. Some days rather than going to the coffee machine or for a tea break, and you do that at your desk, or you do it at your desk while you're working, just to warm up your brain, warm up your body to the task at hand at work. Here's one other exercise, and a great one for the legs, and I'm going to move the camera down as well, but for now, take a look. I've got my hands on my hips, and I'm bending with my feet planted about shoulder width apart. My bottom's dropping and my knees are bent and my back's straight up. I'm not hurting my back. In fact, I'm helping my back with this exercise. Let me show you how it's done at the waist level. Down again. And you can go deeper and make it more aggressive. And what you should be feeling is a burn in this area right here. Thighs from above your kneecap up to your groin or pelvic area. It's a wonderful burn, and be gentle with yourself, because at first some of you, when you do this exercise, you're going to find 5 reps going down, quite a burn in here, and then give yourself a break and see if you can do 2 or 3 more when you start out. And then after a few weeks and months, you may be able to do 10 bends and then 15. And then maybe 3 sets of 15. One more exercise I'm going to show you. It's a good one for the torso. It's good for the shoulders. It limbers you up a bit. Put your hands to the side and rotate this way. You can do this 5, 10, 15 times and then tilt a bit and do it to the side. And then this way again, straight up. And then to the other side, and you decide on the reps. Be smart and gentle with yourself, especially when you're starting, maybe 2, 3, and then 2, 3 again, and you're rotating in this area. It's good for your waist. It's a kind of stretch, especially if you ease into it. In other episodes, I'll show you some stretches, but one stretch for now is you can put one arm above your head this way and grab it with this arm, and pull over this way, and that's going to stretch the side of your body. Some of us spend a lot of time in our chairs, and this is a nice way to limber up the back and the torso and appreciate the benefit of stretching. So those are a few exercises. Side to side this way with the hands pointed down. With the hands pointed up, touching above your head. You choose the reps. 5, 10, 15, maybe 3 sets if you have time. Gets you moving a bit. Side to side with your hands to the side. And then tilt it. And then up again. And then tilting again. And then with your hands on your hips, down, bending, deeper bends if you want more of a burn. And remember, on this exercise that really impacts the thighs, If you're burning hard after 2 or 3, be easy with yourself. Start with 2, 3, or 4 reps, and then move up as you can to 10 and 15 and 3 sets of. One more exercise, hand on the side of your desk or the counter, and up on your toes. And try and do that for your calf muscles 5, 10, 15 times. And once again, 3 sets, depending on your work day, but it gets you out of that sedentary stagnation. And you're stimulating many systems within the body, the metabolic system, the blood flow system, oxygen being transported to your cells, stimulation for your brain. So you can always justify with your bosses being more productive by taking that 2 to 3 minute break at your desk so you can be more productive, more outputs in a given half-hour segment at work because of the healthfulness and the stimulation to your brain, especially for those of you doing any kind of physical or mental labor. And most of the time it's a combination of both, even when we're sitting in our chairs, but to keep your brain ticking. I'll have many more episodes of this kind, shorter now that you've gotten a sense of the general prowess and benefits of exercise for work, for family life, for recreational and community life. Thank you for tuning in. A few more exercises next time. And remember, get out of your sedentary stagnation. It's leading to all kinds of illness across the whole of North America and the world, including type 2 and type 1 diabetes, and affecting younger people as well, and the same with heart disease, equally impacting women and men, and cancer of various forms, just to begin your awareness of some of the health risks associated with the excessive sedentary lifestyle of the modern computer age. This is Dr. Winston George Tannis, wishing you good health and good success in family and professional life. I just want to see how the system works. Testing 1, 2, 3. This is Winston George Tannis in studio.